My name is Stephen Davis, Commander of American Legion Post 39, Oldham County, and I'd like to welcome you all here this evening for our Veterans Day observance. To begin with, we'll post the colors. Troop 167, post the colors.
Post the colors. Post the colors. Salute.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, Denise Watts Wilson will sing the national anthem for us.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Color guard. About face. Drummer. Color guard.
That was, as you can see in your program, Cub Scout Pack 28, who led us in the pledge. And now we have Post 39, Assistant Chaplain Harold Overton, to lead us in the invocation.
Let's pray together. Our most holy Lord, on this day of remembrance, we approach your throne with humility and the utmost gratitude. Today, we lift our prayers to you in deep appreciation for all our servicemen and women, past and present. We know that the fabric of our nation is woven strong by their unwavering service, and it endures with the valor of their sacrifice. Their selflessness creates in our nation's flag each star a beacon of hope, each stripe a narrative of liberty. We thank you for granting them the strength to defend, the resilience to endure, and the compassion to protect. Bless them, O Lord, with your unfailing love, and ensure that their deeds are forever remembered and honored among us. May we never take for granted the peace that their service has bestowed upon us, nor the freedom it secures. Guide us to show our gratitude in ways that go beyond mere words, Lord, through actions that daily affirm that their sacrifices are etched in the fabric of our nation. Help us to remember that behind every uniform is a heart of courage, a story of sacrifice, and a life dedicated to the greater good. In the name of your Son and our Savior we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please take your seats. I want to begin by saying, if you are not a veteran, you have never served, would you please make yourself known, either stand if you're able, or... If you are not a veteran, you've never served in the military, please make yourself known, either stand or otherwise be recognized. I want to thank you all in particular for coming out tonight, because it is your support that means the very most to us as veterans. So thank you, and let's give them applause. Okay. Angie, you got the music? Okay, we're going to recognize each of the services with their service song now. When your song is played, please stand. And sing along if you know the words. Army. This is, I'm sure this is not an inter-service thing.
That's all you get. Army, sit down.
Navy? I know we got some of those. Marines, I have to tell you,
First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. Hoorah!
Air Force. My fault.
Sure this is Air Force?
No, I'm not. I guess it's down there. All right, everybody stood for the Coast Guard. That was Coast Guard. Now this is the Air Force. Sorry. That's all right.
Hey, nothing stops the USA.
left is the Space Force. Anybody want to be Space Force? All right. That was a little rough. Perhaps we'll improve as we go on. Next, it is tradition to honor our POWs missing in action. And here to do that for us this evening is the Special Operations Command Colin T. Thompson Division, U.S. Naval Sea Cadets, Brady Johnson and Dylan Beckham.
POW-MIA Remembrance Table is set for symbolizing the fact that members of our armed forces are missing from our ranks. They are referred to as POWs and MIAs. We call them comrades. They are unable to be with their loved ones and families, so we join together to pay our humble tribute to them and bear witness to their continued absence. This table, set for one, is small, symbolizing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his or her suppressors. The tablecloth is white, symbolic of the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. A single rose is in the vase, signifying the blood that many have shed and sacrificed to ensure the freedom of our beloved United States of America. This rose also reminds us of the family and friends of our missing comrades who keep the faith while awaiting their return. The yellow ribbon on the vase represents the yellow ribbons worn on the lapels of the thousands who demand, with unyielding determination, a proper accounting of their comrades who are not among us tonight. A slice of lemon on the plate reminds us of their bitter fate. The salt sprinkled on the plate reminds us of the countless fallen tears of families as they wait. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us this night. The chair is empty. They are not here. The candle is reminiscent of the light which lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from their captors, to the open arms of a grateful nation.
My next duty is to introduce Judge Vogel. As I do so, I want to point out that Judge Vogel is and has been for, I think, longer than me, a member of Post 39, and we're so glad to have him as a post. I also want to recognize the other elected officials here, our Attorney General, Russell Coleman. We have several magistrates here. I see Chris Hounds. I know Mr. Jeffries and Michael Logston is here as well. Am I missing any elected officials? I really appreciate you folks coming out because I know you're always busy.
Mayor John Black.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your mayor. Mayor John Black, who I've known for a long time too. He's been serving Oldham County for a long time, and I appreciate that. With that, Judge, will you do the honors, please?
Also want to recognize for just a second former magistrate J.D. Sparks, who's here tonight with us as well and is working now in emergency management for the state. It's a good crowd here tonight. This is my 18th year here, and we've had some nights when it was kind of thin, some nights when we've had a good crowd. We appreciate it, and we know that everybody appreciates people who have served in the armed forces. I'm sure that probably Attorney General recognized that he's sitting right in the first row, so he saw me stand up for the Army and the Air Force and wondered which one I was in. But actually, I've been in both of them. I was mostly in the Air Force, but Kentucky Air National Guard. But when I came to Minnesota, I came from Minnesota in 1972, I was actually in the Army Reserve. But I worked with someone who was a public affairs officer at the Air Guard, and he went on a recruiting mission right away. He said, "You don't have to stay in the Army, you can join the Air Guard." And so I did, and we had a lot of fun in the TV section. We were in public affairs, and one of the people we served with there was Second Lieutenant Ed Tonini, who eventually wound up as Kentucky Adjutant General. And if you serve long enough, you keep going up and do a good job, you keep going up the rope there. So anyway, it was, and I want to recognize my wife here tonight, Mary Lee. I won't tell this story too long, but one Sunday morning at the Air National Guard, they said, well, if you'll give blood down at the hangar, the Red Cross is down there, we'll let you have the afternoon off. So about 200 guys lined up in the hangar to give blood. And as we looked ahead, the Red Cross had about 4 stations out there. And, you know, each station nurse is handling about 3 people. And as my friends and I, 4 people at each station, as my friends and I looked to the front, and well, most of the nurses were old enough to be your grandma, you know, and so we all said, let's get over there on the left. And so when we got to the front of the line, one of my friends went this way, another one went that way, and I was the only person that made it to the left. And so, now I'm going to get emotional. And we've been married 49 years. So that's the girl. So anyway, so I owe a lot to the Air Guard. Never would have happened if it hadn't been for Jack Crowner at Wave recruiting me to the Air Guard. I also mention this every time I get a chance to say anything, and I'm probably worn out a few people with this, but our county is named after a veteran. Didn't have American Legion post at that point, but Colonel William Oldham fought in the American Revolution, fought at Monmouth Courthouse, he fought in Montreal. He was among the group that helped Henry Knox bring back cannon from Fort Ticonderoga, and he eventually went from the Virginia, he wound up with the Pennsylvania 5th at the end. He started off serving with another group of people, but some of them got captured at Montreal, and he made it out of there and joined the Pennsylvania 5th. So eventually he died in the Battle of the Wabash up southeast of Fort Wayne, Indiana, when Washington wanted the area open to settlers. But we have on our courthouse lawn a plaque next to the Colonel Oldham statue that we have enlisted the names of about 20 people, and those are all Revolutionary War veterans that we have identified that are buried in Oldham County. So they're veterans as well from a long time ago. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Tim Feely. I've known Tim a long time, and Tim has been a stellar public servant in our community and our state. Tim graduated from Pennsylvania Army ROTC in 1978 and served 4 years as a finance officer, including 3 years in the Berlin Brigade. And while serving, Tim completed law school and finished his Army service as a JAG officer at Fort Knox. He then went on later to serve as a member of the Kentucky House of Representatives from 1999 to 2004. And then he was appointed to be family court judge in Oldham County. He was there for 10 years, retiring in 2016. And I might say family court judge is a tough job because everybody that comes into your court is struggling in their family about something. And one of my daughters is a teacher, and she's been in Tim's court with a child sitting on her lap as The child had to testify about difficulties in their own family. That is a real, you have to be, like Solomon to be a family court judge. And Tim did an outstanding job for 10 years. Tim is most proud of his wife, who served for 23 years as an Army dentist. And he retired as a colonel. He has 4 children. 2 of them are Marines, and 2 of them are in the Army. So, Tim, welcome tonight.
Thank you, Judge Vogel, and Judge Black, good to see you here, and General Coleman, great to have you here, and all the magistrates and everybody else here. First, let me wish you a happy Veterans Day. And before we go, though, Denise, I've been to a lot of baseball games, and I've been to a lot of football games, and I'm not sure I've heard a more spirited pledge of song. So thank you again very much for doing that. Veterans Day started in 1918 on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, when the armistice was signed for ending the war to end all wars. Wish that it was. A year later, President Woodrow Wilson made Armistice Day a special day in the United States, but it wasn't until 1938 that Armistice Day became a federal holiday. And then after World War II, in 1954, General Eisenhower designated Armistice Day, the 11th day of November, as Veterans Day to celebrate the veterans, not only from World War I, but World War II, and all the veterans who have served since then. Now, when Steve asked me to speak tonight, I said, you don't want me, you want my wife, Sue, to speak, because she has a much more impressive military background than I do. But he said no, he wanted me to give a little perspective of the family life that serves along with the military member. I was in the Army for 8 years, and I'd be happy to regale you with all the stories of how I personally won the Cold War by being stationed in the Berlin Brigade when there was a wall around the city. But that'll have to wait for another day. Instead, I'm going to tell you about my service as a family member to a service member. Sue, my lovely wife, who's here today, and I'll have to tell you this, it's also her birthday. And so, and she ran a dental practice here in Oldham County, so she always had to go to work on her birthday. But I was working for the federal government and the state government, so I always had off. She never thought it was fair that I was off on her birthday, and she had to work. Sue and I met in the Army in the summer of 1978. We both graduated from college, from different colleges with ROTC commitments, and the Army, in its infinite wisdom, sent us both to Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana, where we met there. One of our first dates, in fact, the first real date that we went on, I was from New Jersey. I had never been in the Midwest, but what do you do in the Midwest on a Saturday afternoon? I'm going to drive down the road and go to this place called Louisville, because they have a thing called Churchill Downs, and the ponies will run. And so our first date is, I saw this cute little girl, and I said, hey, you want to go with me to Churchill Downs? We ended up going down, watching the ponies run. Coming back across the river, we heard a calliope, turned around, and we went on the Belle of Louisville that night. Neither of us knew we were going to end up in the Louisville area, but that's the way things work out. So the summer of '78, we met both in Army training. And then let's fast forward 10 years to the summer of '88. In the summer of '88, we were both captains in the Army, stationed at Fort Knox. Well, I was a captain. She was a major. Because the dental exam promotions worked a lot faster. And it was funny, when she became a major, we were living on post, in post housing, and our neighbors would come out every morning to see if I would salute her on our way to work. So anyway, summer of '88, we looked at our situation. We were both in the Army. We had 3 little girls with us at the time, and the Army was getting ready to reassign us. They wanted to send me on an unaccompanied tour to South Korea, and Sue on an unaccompanied tour to Panama. And we sat there scratching our heads saying, who's going to watch these 3 girls while we're all overseas? And we made the decision then it was time to get out of the service. We also started looking around where would be a great place to raise our family, and we did a little research and decided on Oldham County. And one October, beautiful October afternoon, I was at the office, and it was a Sunday afternoon. Sue read the paper, said there's this farmhouse for sale in Oldham County. Let's go look at it. And we've been Oldham County residents ever since. We actually moved in on January 1st, 1989. I got out of the Army in April of 1989, knowing we were getting out and we were setting up things. And luckily, I was picked up at the Department of Justice, Western District of Kentucky, and so I went to work for the Department of Justice. Sue was committed in the Army until September of 1989. And the interesting thing about that was soon after we moved to Oldham County and I was making plans to get out, she said, oh, we're going to have a 4th child. And so for her last couple months, she was commuting from Oldham County to Fort Knox on the brand new Gene Snyder freeway that had pretty much just opened up. And I'll tell some stories on you. One good story was a little morning sickness hit her one day while she was driving to work. And so she pulled over to the side of the road in her Army colonel, her Army major uniform, and was retching on the side of the road when a group of recruits went by in a bus. And it was like, oh boy, the Army's tougher than we thought. So anyway, September 1989 comes around, and our 4th child, after 3 girls, we had a boy, comes along, and Sue is getting out of the service. But she decided that she wanted to keep her hand in it. First of all, she loved the Army, and second of all, she loved dentistry. And she wanted to keep in it, even though she was going to stay home with the 4 kids. So she joined a reserve unit. And so in September of 1989, with the 4th children there, she's started her service in the U.S. Army Reserves. That worked out real well until a guy named Saddam Hussein decided he was going to attack Kuwait in August of 1990. And he went into Kuwait the beginning of August 1990. By the end of August, Sue's reserve duty unit was the first medical unit called up in the country. So she was given orders, she's leaving home, okay? And we started talking about, how tough it's gonna be. We can do it, we can handle it and all that. And so she went off to Fort Knox for an orientation, and they told her immediately she was gonna be going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So she came back, spent a couple of days, said goodbye to the kids, packed up. We had a nice minivan at the time, and I had a little pickup truck. Well, she left me with the minivan, so she took my pickup truck. She had her bicycle in the back. She had like skis in the back. She was ready to go to war. And she drove away from the house. I'm sitting there on the porch with 4 little kids. They were aged 6, 5, 2, and 11 months old at the time. And my wife is going off to war. And so it was an interesting time for us. Let's see, there was a Louisville Courier-Journal front page article about me being sort of the Louisville answer to Mr. Mom, because I was taking care of all the kids. The funny thing about that, and you'll appreciate this, General Coleman, the morning that story ran in the Courier-Journal, first thing I got was a phone call, and it was District Court Judge Edward Johnstone. Old, if any, he was just an old grouchy guy, great judge though. And he called me up and said, Mr. Freely, I read your story in the paper. I'm a pretty good babysitter, so if you ever need help. And I was like, this is great. This is great. A district court judge just volunteered to babysit my children. That's wonderful. So we survived it, okay? One way we survived it, we had a babysitter who worked with us for a couple months, and after about 2 months, she says, I can't do it anymore. It's too many hours and all. So I had to hire a second shift babysitter. So I had one babysitter who came at 7 in the morning, and then she left at 3, and then I had a high school senior who came at 3 and stayed till 6, which allowed me to do my job at the Department of Justice Monday through Friday. Now, the reason the babysitter had to come at 7 in the morning was because I could get the girls up, I could get them fed, I could get their clothes out, but they wouldn't let me touch their hair. So the babysitter had to come in time to do their hair before our 2 oldest children went off to first grade and kindergarten while their mother was out in the war. Now, when Sue got to Fort Leonard Wood, they immediately said, you're not going to stay at Fort Leonard Wood. You're going to go up to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. And she and the late, great Susie Riley, another dentist, went up to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. And they opened up a dental clinic to process through reservists who were being called up to go into the war in Desert Storm. And literally, this was a dental clinic that had not been opened since the Korean War. And they had to get all the supplies and get all that. And they spent the next several months away from home taking care of reservists, making sure that they weren't going to have a tooth blow up while they're in the war. Now, that was okay, but it was still far away from home, leaving me at home with 4 little kids. But we managed because we knew what she was doing was important. And it really worked out well for the family. I will tell the story that at Christmas time, I decided to pack the 4 little kids up in the minivan and drive up to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. That was a trip because it was a pretty bad winter that time. And I was going at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, in snow and ice and everything, and just want to get there safely. But we got to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. Sue was able to get a little cabin for us to stay in, and we had our Christmas on an Army base in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. I will tell you, Christmas Day, I went outside, and the ambient temperature, this wasn't the wind chill, the ambient temperature was 26 degrees below zero. And we were in this old World War II cabin that was heated with coal. And I remember coming at, you know, on Christmas morning, snow about up to here and all that, and the kids were all huddled around, but it's an adventure for them. And this gentleman comes and starts shoveling coal into our thing. And I told the kids that was Santa Claus, and it was for us. Well, as time went on, after that Christmas, we heard that Sue was under orders to go to Kuwait. Because even though she's a dentist, you don't think she's going to be, you know, one of the fighting soldiers. Dentists, first of all, they need dentists to have a clinic there, but they also are triage physicians. And so she was ready to go, and she was all set to go to Kuwait in the end of January. Luckily, if those of us old enough to remember it, was the shock and awe of that war that quickly turned the tide of the war and got to the point where we didn't need to send the troops that we did. And so that came towards the end of the war. And so I think, great, the war's ending, she can come home now. That's not how it works, because all of the reservists who went through to get their teeth checked before they went overseas now had to come back and out-process. So she was gone until May. And the goal was for her to come back in time for the Derby Festival Parade, because General Schwarzkopf was the honorary chairman of that, and I'm like, if General Schwarzkopf can be here, by gosh, my wife can be here. So, not to bore you too much with all the stories, but it's my whole life here. After that experience, Sue decided to get out of the reserves. I was like, we can't do this anymore. 4 kids was just too much and all that. So she got out of the reserves. I kept working with the Department of Justice, and then, you know, we bought a practice. She did her dental practice and all. And time moved along. Our kids were getting older. Our oldest daughter decided that she was interested in going into an ROTC program. So she went down to talk to an Army recruiter. Well, the Army recruiter couldn't care less about our older daughter, but when she heard that my wife was a former Army dentist, he gave her a big spiel on how to be, you know, how much we needed an Army dentist. So the next thing I know, she's back in the reserves. And in the reserves, she ended up getting deployed a couple times. And there I was again with, you know, 4 kids at home, and she's off doing her Army duty. And I'm like going, wait a second, this isn't, you know, luckily we had the means to take care of things. Luckily we had friends and family support that helped a lot. But the mission there, you have to understand that the family members serve the way the military members do. I learned such an appreciation for military spouses and single parents during that period of time when she was gone. Long story short, she went back into the reserves. She did a couple assignments. She got a couple commands. There were days when she would come home from her dental office, go right to her computer, still with her coat on, and work on Army stuff until 10:30 at night. And I'm like going, do you want some dinner? Do you want anything? And I was the spouse there while she was doing that. But she must have set a good example for our kids, because all 4 of our kids followed her in the military, and me in the military. Our oldest daughter, Kathleen, went ROTC at Western Kentucky University. She became an Army nurse, did 3 tours overseas as an Army trauma nurse, and spent 1 tour of duty in the Obama White House as a White House nurse. Our second daughter, Mary, went a little different way. She went to West Point and got commissioned as an Army officer in West Point. She is still serving today in the Army she was a military intelligence officer, and then she had a couple shall I say, jobs where she didn't have to wear a uniform. But she served certainly overseas in Afghanistan. She served in the Philippines, in South Korea, and she's had quite a career serving our nation. There was one story I'll tell about Mary was one night I was laying on my couch and my phone rang. It was late at night. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was Mary calling from the Kumar province in Afghanistan. She was working as a military police officer with local communities and local police officers. And the mayor of this little town in Afghanistan heard that her father was a judge, and he wanted to talk to an American judge. And so at 1 o'clock in the morning, I get this phone call, and I get this guy, I can barely understand anything he's saying, but he was just so excited to be talking to a judge. And I'm like, that's amazing that she can be on the other side of the world and those things still happen. But she did great work working with the local communities. My third daughter, Peggy, who's standing up and back and all that, she followed me to the University of Pennsylvania, then did the Navy ROTC. And the story I like to tell on her military service is during her summers in college, she went off on a ship with the Navy. And she came back, she said, "Dad, I hated it. Every day it was like Groundhog's Day. Every day was the same. There was nothing on the horizon. You get up, you do the exact same every day. I'm going Marine Corps option." And so she went Marine Corps option, went through all the training, met her husband there in the training. They sent her to Top Gun school so she could learn not to fly the planes, but she was directing them from the ground. And when she graduated from that school, they put her on a ship in the Gulf. And so she served in the Gulf. And then just to bore you a little bit more, my fourth child, Jack, my son. Many of you may know Jack. I used to go around Oldham County State. People would say, "Hi, Judge," and now they go around and say, "Hi, you're Jack's dad, aren't you?" Jack's a firefighter for Louisville, but he was not the student that the girls were. Was working at UPS, came home one day and said, "Dad, I joined the Marine Corps." I said, "You didn't even tell me you were going to talk to him." He just went ahead and did it. And my favorite story of Jack, if you know him, it fits perfectly. He was a military police officer in the Marine Corps, went to training at Fort Leonard Wood, and in between training cycles, they kept him busy there was a defensive driving course, and the enlisted guys had to drive the junk cars out to the course so people could drive around them. And his friends described him to me. It was the middle of July, 90 degrees out. He's driving like this 1972 Buick, piece of junk. All the windows rolled down, and he found a Christmas music cassette. And he was just driving down through the fields, listening to Christmas music at the top of his lungs, and that just fits Jack. But he did his 4 years in the Marine Corps, got out. Now, my family is an example of how military service works. So many people who serve in the military are family members. My father was in the Marines in World War II. My mother was in the Navy in World War II. Sue's father was in the Army Air Corps in World War II. We have grandparents and great-parents who served. My 2 brothers have both served, one in the Marines, one in the Air Force. My 2 nephews have both served, one in the Marines, one in the Coast Guard. It's a family tradition. And it's something we can't lose in the United States. We can't lose the family tradition. But there was a recent RAND study that said that although the military is one of the institutions that thought highly of by the American public, a lot of people aren't encouraging their children to join the military anymore because of the forever wars, because of the, for lack of a better term, the wokeness that has been used in our military lately. And so we have to address that problem, because someday down the road, we're going to need to re-up our military and be ready to go. We need to keep a fighting force all the time, but we need to be able to re-up and go. And we need to work on making sure that people understand that military service is important, it's fulfilling, and it's important for the nation. And so if I can leave you today with a message, my message is that as veterans, talk to your friends, your neighbors, and all that. And when you have a young man who's not sure what he wants to do, tell him to look in the military. I did that the other day at a Rotary meeting. We had a young girl who gave a really nice speech to our Rotary class. And I asked her where she's thinking of going to college. She said, well, I'm looking at UK. I said, have you looked at one of the service academies? And her eyes lit up. She said, no, why would I do that? And I told her about it, and she's like, she would be a perfect candidate to that. We need to make sure that we've got the next generation ready to go to serve our country and to move forward. Now, tonight I was watching a little bit on the news, and they had the gentleman there, Frank, I forget his last name, who runs Tunnels to Towers. And they are doing great things for veterans. They're taking old hotels and making them into rooms for homeless vets. They've housed 8,200 homeless vets in the last year. And the Tunnels to Towers and the Wounded Warriors and those groups, they deserve our support and our help. Now, the Veterans Administration does a lot for our veterans and is doing more and more. Their medical system is improving, in part because they're allowing people to go outside of the system if it's not available for them. So I urge you, support the Veterans Administration, support those groups that help our veterans, because we need to make sure that our veterans are served. There are a lot of groups that are helping family members. One of the things the military has done recently is that family members now have the same job preference as veterans for federal jobs. So when you're moving a lot, your spouse can get a job where they're going. That's a big help. They also have a thing called the FRGs, which my wife will laugh about, as the family readiness groups. If a unit deploys, they get the spouses together and put together in a formal thing for them to support one another. And also the military has a online Military One Source that will help in all things. You can ask all sorts of questions, get answers done there. And the VA has a National Veterans Homeless Hotline that you can go online and find homes for, or if you know of a homeless vet, you can get online and get them into a home. And they also do a suicide hotline. If you know anybody who is a veteran who has problems, have them dial 988, then push #1, and they get right to the Veterans Hotline, and they'll help them. So there's a lot of help out there for veterans, but the best way and the American way is we help ourselves. So I'd be happy to answer any questions any of you might have. I like regaling you with the stories, because I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of what they've done. I'm proud of what my wife has done, what my 4 children have done, and I hope that all of you have people in your families you can be proud of the same. Thank you.
This is my first opportunity to host you here, since I'm the new commander this year. And in the best tradition, I'll take a few moments for myself. The first thing I want to say is I noticed from Tim's remarks, what I noticed from all of our military spouses is they don't talk about themselves. They talk about their military member. It's quite remarkable. And I will tell you that there's a lot of versions. I've had the distinct pleasure of serving in Frankfurt, in the military in Frankfurt. I've served in Washington, D.C. I've served in Afghanistan. And I will tell you that there's many versions of what makes the American military successful. One of those is how hard we train. It's our commitment and our traditions. Some in Washington say it's the quote, the little old lady in tennis shoes who work in the bowels of the Pentagon without any recognition, but they, in the same job year after year after year, so they give the continuity when we officers come and go every 2 to 3 years. They have the continuity and they make it work. But I will tell you that I would have been probably 6 years or less in the military if it hadn't been for my spouse saying, yeah, you can do 1 more year. You know, and the spouses who say, you know, I want you home, then that's what happens. So if you have someone in the military, I encourage you to support them and support their dreams and their hopes and their aspirations. So I say that. And then I'm going to tell a story on myself. When I was serving in the full-time in the Kentucky National Guard, it was September 10th, 2001, and I needed to go to a dentist, and so I went to this dentist in where I was living then in Crestwood, Kentucky. That was Sue Feely, and I said, yeah, I came here because I could go to Fort Knox, but I really don't trust Army dentists. And she said, oh, is that right? Well, you came to an Army dentist. I'm well known for having to eat a lot of crow. All right. So with those notes, then it is time for Denise once again to lead us in God Bless the USA. And I think the words to that, and it was that, did no one tell you, Denise?
No.
You're encouraged to sing along. Words are in your program.
If tomorrow all things were gone, I've worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. And my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. But there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, and New York to LA. There's pride in every American heart, as time is as they say. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'm gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause
In closing, I just want to mention, thank you to Denise, of course, who always helps us out and is always welcome here. A veteran and an Army chaplain, and we thank you. Thank you, Tim, for those remarks. Outstanding. I thank Hetty Radcliffe. Every year they print the programs for us. They provide the refreshments. Joelle, are you here, Joelle? Thank you, Joelle. Appreciate that. And for everyone who participated and everyone who came, a very heartfelt thanks. This is the biggest crowd we've had in years, and it really is heartwarming. Thank you so much. With that, we will retire the colors, and then Chaplain Overton will give us the benediction. And then I encourage everyone to stay, enjoy the refreshments. David over here, our Sergeant at Arms, is prepared to sign you up if you're not already a member and you're eligible for membership. And also, I want to encourage you that January 9th at 5:30, if you're eligible for membership in our auxiliary, we're going to have an organizational meeting there, and my lovely wife back there is in charge of that, Robin. And if you have any questions about that, you can ask either her or I. And so, again, thank you all for coming. With that, Troop 167, retire the colors.
Color guard, attention. Shoulder, arms. Drummer. Color guard, halt. Color guard, prepare to retrieve the colors. Color guard, retire the colors. Color guard, reform. About face. Drummer.